Chris and Chris Talk Movies.
Hello, and welcome back to the podcast. My name is Chris Ferry, and of course, this is my co-host.
My name is Chris Huddleston.
And today we are both very excited to be talking to you about the 1990-something Cronenberg.
99.
What 99 was it?
We're going to party like it's 1999. Yes, 1999.
That's what we're going to do, just like it's 1999. Cronenberg's movie eXistenZ. Do you have a synopsis for us, monsieur?
I do. So as you said, it is a 1999 film directed by David Cronenberg. And it stars Jude Law, Jennifer Jason Leigh, Ian Holm, Willem Dafoe, among others. And the synopsis from IMDb is: a game designer on the run from assassins must play her latest virtual reality creation with a marketing trainee to determine if the game has been damaged. That's like a very boring synopsis, I think. But so I had seen this previously, you had not. And we haven't discussed previously what our thoughts were. And I'm curious because we did Videodrome, which you didn't really like very much. And this has some similar themes to Videodrome. So take it away.
You know, I think, and I don't want to, I'm not going to say I hated this movie because that's not true. I'm beginning to think I'm just not.
You're just not into Cronenberg?
Not liking Cronenberg. I mean, I appreciate it. You know, I mean, I recognize his place in cinema and certainly respect a lot. Like the concept of this movie, which is sort of a game within a game within a game. It's a little bit like Inception in that way. They kind of log into this virtual reality game that is so real that it's indistinguishable from reality, except weird, crazy stuff happens. But then they come out of the game, but wait a minute, are we out of it? Because weird stuff is still happening, and it kind of iterates itself into weirder and weirder repeats of more or less the same storyline again and again. And I think that's really cool, and I think that's a lot of fun to do in a movie. I like the cast in this. I mean, Ian Holm is a favorite of mine. Jude Law, I think, does a really nice job. Everybody hands in a good performance. It is confusing. It doesn't tell you the answer. I had a little trouble parsing out by the end of it. So
I feel like we ought to, and this is a more than 20-year-old movie, and we spoil. I think we need to talk about the ending.
We have to talk
definitely
about the ending.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're gonna talk all the way through this one. Yeah, at the end, I think you're supposed to be left kind of scratching your head as to like, well, so what was the real? When did the game actually start, and what do we trust is real? And I feel like that was one of the points of the whole film. There are some, to use a cooking metaphor, there are some flavors in this movie, and I think in the flavors that with which Cronenberg likes to cook, so to speak, just to keep with the cooking metaphor, that aren't my favorite flavors. You know what I mean? Like there's a very, very strong sexual element to this from the game console, that the game consoles are organic. So they like breed these weird lizards. This is set in the sort of, it's not set in 1999, right? It's set in some near future time where the technology for such a virtual reality game, they have like data ports implanted in their bodies that they can kind of jack in a la, Neuromancer or the Matrix or something like that, where so and when you're in it, when you're in the virtual reality, it's indistinguishable from real life. So we're talking about a time near now. There aren't flying cars and stuff, but this technology obviously doesn't exist yet. But the consoles themselves are organic, and they have these sort of, they've bred kind of animals that they harvest the organs that they then repurpose to build these consoles. And the consoles jack into you in a port at the base of your spine that looks like a butthole. And the cord looks like an intestine. It looks like a small intestine.
or
And
an umbilical cord. Is what I
exactly.
was thinking.
Yeah, or exactly. Exactly. That's better. Um, and the game consoles themselves doesn't have a joystick or buttons. It looks sort of like a vagina and sort of like an inner ear. I mean, and the way in which they play the console is very masturbatory. There are like all these little nubs and crevices that they kind of caress and finger and fiddle with. Fine, but there's a part of me that's just kind of like, ugh. You know what I mean? And I think that's part of it. I think he's intending that. Like
he wants to gross you out. Yeah.
Yeah, but I feel like Cronenberg likes to walk the line between the arousing and the disgusting. And there's this is the wrong application of this term, but there's a kind of an uncanny valley that he's exploring between the erotic and the nauseating, and like he likes to. It's very visceral, right? It's very of the body, and what's a turn on, what's too far and to turn off, and how in some ways are things that make us revulsing also a turn on. I don't know. I haven't studied Cronenberg or read much about him, but I don't particularly like it. I mean, at least you feel like kind of, kind of shuddery. And it's not, I mean, it explores some really interesting concepts. I think that some of my criticisms of this movie are that, and maybe that it was 1999 and we've seen this done in other, this territory explored in other ways since, but some of it feels a little on the nose to me. I think it's interesting with the dialogue, how it's sort of, video game dialogue is not always great dialogue. So sometimes when they're in the game, some of the things that people say are definitely stiff and a little wooden. And I love how they play with essentially live action non-player characters sort of standing around and waiting for you to say,
give them a cue.
Yeah, exactly. And then that was all fun and really interesting. But it wasn't my favorite Cronenberg movie that I've seen. And so it's, it's eXistenZ, and they're very, again and again, you're supposed to pronounce it eXistenZ, and the X is capital and the Z is capital and everything else is lowercase. And I hate that. That drives me.
I don't know if that was some kind of thing that was happening at the time, that like he was annoyed with the names of game companies or something. I don't know. That's what it felt like,
Yeah. And if he's like, oh, I'm going to, twist my thumb in that eye, that's fine. But my experience as a viewer was, if he did that because that irritates him, it irritated me as a viewer. So that was just another little aspect of the way in which I, as the viewer, felt like the movie and the filmmaker were deliberately trying to make me uncomfortable. Fine. You succeeded. I'm not saying that's invalid. I'm just saying as a viewer, I don't particularly enjoy that. So I don't know. That's a long monologue. What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah. So Cronenberg, for me, he's a little bit like David Lynch, that both of them are directors that when I was younger, I didn't really like very much, and I've kind of appreciated more over time. And probably the only Cronenberg that I really saw early on was The Fly, which I really enjoyed in the 80s, but it's one of those really good movies that I haven't really wanted to revisit because it's depressing. I mean, it has all the gross out things, but it's sad ultimately in the end.
That might be my favorite.
Yeah. And I think, that's probably his most mainstream movie, even though it's still a lot of gross out and weird stuff. But I was reading that with this one, and it's funny because it's almost like he's incapable of doing it. And I some of his other, like the non-sci-fi things, like A History of Violence and some of those other ones, I've not seen because I just wasn't all that interested in them. But I was reading that this was Cronenberg's kind of attempt to do mainstream again. And it's like you're saying, these game consoles, I can't imagine a real person actually using them. I'm going to stick an umbilical cord in my back and I'm going to rub on this, weird. And I don't know if you said it or not, but these game consoles are organic. They're some kind of creatures that they're using. They have organs inside them and things, but also so it's just really weird in that way. But I saw this one, it was probably 2000 when I saw it on HBO or Cinemax or one of those channels. And at the time I did not like it. And watching it again, I like it a lot more. And again, I don't know if it's just, I kind of like this weird stuff a little more now, just because, I've seen so many formulaic things over the years. And sometimes I want to see formulaic. And sometimes I want to see something that is just kind of different. I like the cast in this. I think, excuse me, Jude Law's performance is kind of strange in this. His, I don't know how to explain it, but there's almost an uncanny valley sense to the way just that he delivers his lines at times. Does that make sense?
Yeah, well,
I don't know if it's,
there's a couple of things. He's a British actor, of course,
right?
And as we go through sort of different layers of, are we in the game, or what layer of the game are we in, he does speak in his regular voice, but for the majority of the film he's doing a Canadian accent, I think. Very
exactly. Yeah,
it's shot in Canada.
Yeah,
the film is shot.
So
there's, it's about this and about that, and but he's doing
presumably Cronenberg is Canadian, so presumably he wanted to do that. But that just struck me as odd, that it's like, why is he just seemed vaguely Canadian to me, and it's like, I don't really know why, but I guess that's something Cronenberg wanted him to do.
I mean, why not?
Yeah,
Canada's a place.
Yeah, I mean, it's
have an accent,
yeah. So his performance just at times seemed kind of weird to me. And there are, again, I don't know if it's supposed to be, this is we're deconstructing video games or whatever, but even like, there's a lot of weird line delivery. I thought at times that Jennifer Jason Leigh, that was the same with her. Now, one thing, I definitely agree with you on that Cronenberg does this in films, this combination of, it's supposed to be sexy, but it's also gross. I thought Jennifer Jason Leigh was really sexy in this, when it was not rubbing on weird, organic game console things. And there is a lot of, I hadn't remembered how much kind of gross stuff there is that's just, it's not really sci-fi gross, but there's lots of scenes of these creatures being chopped up and just blood everywhere. And it just, that struck me as kind of gross. But this isn't like torture porn gross. There's not a ton of violence in this.
There's some shooting. They
have
this sort of gun made out of bones that shoots human teeth. I mean, it's very visceral is the only word I keep coming back to. And they're always fixing the consoles is kind of dissecting the consoles, and building the consoles is dissecting these animals, and the characters will comment on it. They'll be like, wow, this, there's a factory where they're sort of building the consoles, they're harvesting the organs, and it's kind of an abattoir, and it's filthy, and it's a very strong design choice. And Jude Law's character comments on it. He's like, this is really interesting, an interesting design choice, because this place is so unsanitary.
Mm-hmm.
And I liked when it got, my favorite part of this movie is when it's meta like that, when it talks about itself in the third person kind of. Yeah, I have nothing against Jennifer Jason Leigh. She doesn't particularly send me. I've never.
That was what I was going to say. It surprised me a little bit, because I don't think I would have normally thought that, but just in this movie, she just seemed sexy to me.
I mean, I think
sorry, I keep coughing.
Yeah, she's the game designer, but she's also the mysterious femme fatale, and she's, she's also kind of the white rabbit leading Jude Law's relatively square Alice down the rabbit hole. And I think that's all supposed to be.
There were little funny touches to me. So, so in the beginning, it's these people in a church. Why they're in a church, I don't know why, but this is where they're meeting to do it's almost kind of like a small scale version of, the Apple Expo or whatever, where, there's this, but it's in a little church with 50 people or whatever. And they're presenting eXistenZ. And when the movie opens, you think this is the real world, but you find out later that this is part of the game. But there are I assume these were intentional clues, like so somebody tries to kill her because they're against her being this game developer for whatever reason.
Well, they're kind of against the concept of virtual reality,
right?
They're, on sort of religious terms, like you're destroying human life by creating these places that everybody retreats to instead of living in the real world. That's what I got from it.
Yeah, I would agree. So Jude Law is kind of like her protector, and they go on the run, and he doesn't have a port. It's like he's resisted that all this time. So they go and they find Willem Dafoe, who's this guy who on the surface runs a gas station. And the gas station, it's called like Country Gas Station or something. And it looks so generic. And, you think this is the real world, and you find out that they are within the game when this is going on. And so presumably that was intentional, that this is not a real, this is kind of a representation. But I thought that was funny.
Willem Dafoe's character's name is Gas.
Gas,
He's
yeah.
wearing a, one of those jumpsuits like you gas station attendants wear, and he has a name tag sewn onto it, but the name tag just says Gas.
Right. And that makes me think of another thing that struck me as weird with Jude Law. Everyone in the film it's not like he gave them futuristic outfits or futuristic haircuts, and it kind of seems like it's the near future from 1999, maybe like 10 years later or something like that. But everybody is basically just dressing the way people did in 1999, except for Jude Law, who has this big gray thing that he wears like he's in prison or something. That was really weird to me. I don't know if that was meant to mean something.
There's little touches, like her hairstyle. She's got kind of crimped waves in 4 places on her head. Like down one side, there's just one where somebody took like a hot crimping iron and did one stripe of her hair on the left, one stripe of her hair on the right, and one stripe of her hair down the back. That's a style in the future. But otherwise, it looks just like things would have looked in. The car looks like a car would look in 1999. So
yeah.
I don't know if that's just lazy, or if he needed to make little gestures to show like, oh, this is capital F future capital T time. We're in future time when people's hair is different and they wear gray things. I don't know.
But it just struck me as weird, as it seemed he was the only person who dressed that way, and everybody else, like, they wore like big baggy jeans, and it just seemed like clothing that people wore in 1999. I don't know. Again, maybe it was kind of laziness in that regard.
Or maybe we're missing the deeper, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe that was supposed to have some meaning. Now, when they come out of the game, then Jude Law is wearing like, a V-neck sweater or something. He's wearing more, just looked like contemporary clothing from the time. So
how many layers did they go through? At least 3.
Or
is there a 4th? I don't remember.
I don't know. I think I'd probably have to watch it again and count the different.
Because there's a couple of times when they're like, pause the game or wake up, right? And then they sort of sit up in bed, but pretty quickly you start to think, wait a minute, there's another bone gun. Like there's there's where they woke up, but all of a sudden we're back into this sort of conspiracy plot through line that is an echo and iteration of the one we started with. And this whole thing about the game being damaged, you start to say, I mean, it's in the synopsis that you read, but are they trapped in the game because somehow it was the real world, but the game was damaged and now they're sort of stuck in it? Or is that all just, it feels like game plot, right? That feels like CGI game plot that you have to solve. You know, the technology is damaged and the conspiracy goes all the way to the top and you can't trust anybody and everybody's an assassin until by the end they are the assassins, right?
Right.
They wake in the next iteration, they're in the church, but they aren't the leaders. They are participants who were in the game, and the game designer, who is a totally different guy.
It's basically they're doing like a focus group or something, you know, nobody's played it yet.
For their performance as these sort of lead characters, but then they pull out, I don't remember if it's real guns or bone guns.
They have real guns, yeah.
And they scream death to the creator or whatever and shoot him. And I just wasn't, and the movie ends there. And I wasn't sure if I was supposed to have a Sixth Sense moment where I was like, whoa, they were the assassin, because I didn't.
I think you're supposed to. And I had misremembered the way it ended. I had remembered it as that Jude Law kills her in the end. I had completely forgotten that it's the two of them and they killed the game designer. So they kill the game designer and a couple of other people, and there's another guy who they point their guns at him, and he says something like, are we out of the game or are we still in it?
Right.
And then I don't even know if they fire or not, but it cuts to black then. So it's supposed to be like,
right.
Were they in the game? Or are they not in the game? And that's supposed to be your interpretation. So what did you think? Was it still a game? Or
either way, we're to believe that these assassins came to this church, played a whole through game to the acclaim of the other members. And then when it was over and everybody was taking a moment to pat themselves and the designer on the back, that's when they decided to assassinate him with the guns that they had been carrying the entire time.
Right. Yeah.
People who participated in it for how many hours before executing their plan, which they could have done
in the very beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So but were they in the game then or not? Either way, it's stupid. Like either way, why would you? I mean, I guess in a video game, you justify all these sidebar things to kind of keep the plot from moving forward to milk the game out, but it's still not human behavior, right?
Yeah. And, I got to thinking watching this. So, all throughout it, it's, death to the, it covers a lot of the themes of Videodrome, because in that, you have death to Videodrome or, long live Videodrome or whatever. And this is the same thing where there are these, this battle between the people who want the virtual reality and the people who hate it. And it's like death to this and death to that. And, I got to thinking, okay, so on the one hand, watching this in 1999, I would have thought by now we would have something like this. We're pretty close to it, right?
The VR goggles are heading that direction.
Yeah. But still nothing this, immersive that it's like, oh, I can't tell if I'm in the real world or, I'm in a game or not. But, there are definitely people who either really like social media, these social media creators, or really hate them. But is there anybody out there who's just like, death to Zuckerberg or, death to the Twitter guy or whatever? I mean, I suppose somebody does, but it just doesn't seem like people have that strong of
the Twitter guy.
Yeah. What's the Twitter guy's name? Jack Dorsey or whatever?
I think it's Jack Dorsey. I mean, yeah. I'm not defending. I just I love Zuckerberg's name, but we don't know the Twitter guy.
Yeah. You know what I mean? It's like,
Well, I'm sure that there are people that are revved up about politics or technology or whatever. I mean, you don't need
I mean, we've seen that. Yeah. It seems like there's more of that now than there was in 1999.
Trying to kill each other. I don't know that they stand up and yell before they pull the trigger, that they stand up and yell death to Facebook or death to Republican. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I just don't know anybody that feels like a 1970s trope, death to the infidels or something to me. Like,
Yeah. True.
I mean, you say, why is it in the church? I think that there are lots of religious themes.
Oh yeah. They're definitely,
And
I get the symbolism, but it is just funny that it's in a little church.
yeah, and I think that death to the whatever is an echo of religious zealotry. And you have
Right.
people that are either like zealously in favor of this technology as this is the wave of the future, or zealously anti this technology as is destroying life as we know it.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a
Yeah.
lot of that going around. I mean, you have,
Oh yeah.
rather than Facebook, I would say someone like Elon Musk, or somebody who is talking about AI, or there are things that social media certainly has a lot of detractors for measurable reasons, but I don't necessarily hear people talking about social media as being it will be. I hear people talking about AI, that it might be the end of human existence, and global warming and fossil fuels, that it may be the end of human existence. But I don't, for all of the evils I hear people spinning about social media, many of which I agree with, I don't hear people talking about it in terms, or the metaverse in terms of it being the end of human existence. It's sort of an existential threat to the way in which we envision our society. But there are things now that people are talking about in apocalyptic terms, and video games and virtual reality aren't among them.
It's funny with, what I know about what's going on with the metaverse is, and part of this I'm taking from movies like this, and so many movies that we've watched over the years, where it's like, oh, once we get to where there's true virtual reality, you can get into a really dystopian thing, because it's going to be, the person lets their baby in real life starve to death because they're in the virtual world having fun, and they can't, it's like a drug that they can't escape. And the way they're presenting the metaverse is like, you could do work in there, and it's like you can go to virtual McDonald's, and it's like, who wants to do, isn't it like, you want to, it's like, it isn't the how it's always been presented, is like, oh, you're gonna like have sex with Marilyn Monroe or whatever, it's like all the things that Facebook seems to be presenting it as, is like, you're just going to do the same stuff you do in real life except in virtual reality. That sounds terrible.
Well, and the only benefit of it is the only thing is like, well, maybe you have more in-game currency than you have real money, or
Yeah.
maybe you feel like going to McDonald's, but you don't feel like dealing with actual people. So you can virtually go to McDonald's and not have to deal with real people.
Yeah. And I can buy fake real estate where I can, if I have the money, I can live next to Snoop Dogg in VR.
You can now
I know.
use real money. I guess it's crypto, but you can now buy real estate in the virtual world. And I don't know much about it, but Tom was telling me about it the other day, is that the prices for real estate are comparable to real world real estate. Like,
yeah.
I could barely afford this house that I just bought. It's a modest house. I'm not going to buy completely. Now, we might be listening to this in 20 years and be like, you fools, you had an opportunity to buy virtual stuff.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. I mean, I definitely
real world prices. Now there's no way you could afford it.
Definitely, there, some of these things are going to have value, and all that. And it's going to be one of those things where I'm sure there are people listening to this or watching it and are like, you guys are old fogies, this is the way of the future or whatever, and it's going to be great. Maybe. I'm
not saying it won't become something. I'm just saying,
right,
maybe my old fogey brain has trouble envisioning it. So my wife and I built it. We built a patio last summer, and to keep a long story short, I like to just hang out on the patio. I have this enormous amount of satisfaction from having to And I think we did a pretty good job of it. It's not
Sure.
it's far from perfect, but it's there now.
Mhm.
And I do think the older I get, the more it's like if it's a nice 70-degree day and the breeze is blowing and I don't have any work or any responsibilities to do, I could take a beer and I can sit on the patio and I can just watch nature while I enjoy a beer. It's simple pleasure. And,
Right.
and I don't remember savoring the tiny things in life like that when I was younger. But it's hard for me to imagine now to scrimp and save on a virtual world. Like I guess the virtual world would have to, in my mind, get a lot better for me to
Yeah.
prefer spending my free time in a virtual place than in a real place.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah. For me with the virtual stuff, it's, again, it's, I don't want to go to a virtual beach that I could go to in real life. I want to fly or something,
Yeah. I mean, if it's gamified, if it's,
yeah.
I get games, I play games, and that's,
Right.
you play games, you spend time in a virtual. Sure. But then that's got its whole hierarchy of like, you're blowing up aliens or you're solving
Yeah.
mysteries or you're doing something that triggers the adrenaline response where you're like, yeah, fun. That's awesome.
But I think they are, corporations are going to get into it and it's going to be like, oh, you can walk down to Starbucks. I mean, Starbucks is already talking about they're going to be selling NFTs. And it's like, what does that have anything to do with coffee? Can you not just make coffee? I don't know. It's just like
Write a letter. Dear
yeah,
Starbucks,
dear
can you
Starbucks.
just make coffee.
I just feel like they're going to screw it up and it's going to be like, hey, we know, you're going to Mars, but this trip to Mars was brought to you by Wendy's.
Well, yeah. Well, they're going to
And
commercial.
it's like, can't I just escape all of that crap?
It's the commercialism. They're like, I don't
Yes.
hate coffee and I don't even hate Wendy's, but it's the advertising, the incessant. I was talking to somebody the other day. Is like, I think social media has got a lot of great stuff to it. Like it has connected me with people that I would not otherwise be in touch with, but I can't spend more than about 20 minutes on Facebook without starting to sort of feel bad. Like,
Oh yeah.
and I
For
can't really
sure.
even put it, it's not that I'm necessarily angry at all the political commentary, or I just feel kind of like, I don't know how to put a finer point on it. I just start to feel bad a little bit, maybe a little bit bad about myself, a little bit bad about the world, a little bit hopeless about the future. I don't know, but collectively bad. And
Mhm.
I don't want to spend time in a place that quickly makes me feel bad, right?
Yeah.
You had mentioned TikTok. No, was it you? Were you and I talking about TikTok?
We were talking about it. Yeah.
Yeah, where it's full of silly baloney. Like it's just little videos people make, and I like to watch the ones that are funny.
Mhm.
But there's dancing and singing, and they're not very long. And I don't feel like it has become. In other words, I watch it. You go down a rabbit hole with TikTok when you're bored and watching all this scrolling through silly stuff, but I only have about 15, 20-minute stomach for that too, because I just start to feel kind of glazed over, but I don't feel bad,
Mhm.
because most of it, even if it's stuff you don't like, you just are like, meh, pass, pass, pass. Oh, that was kind
Well,
of cute, pass, and it's not
and for
leading.
um, all of Facebook's targeting and algorithms and all that kind of stuff, I don't feel like they do a great job of presenting what I want to see. Like TikTok does and Instagram does. And people complain about, oh, they have all the advertising data and everything. Well, I have purchased things that were advertised to me on Instagram, and it was like, oh, I never knew this thing existed, but I really like this. So it's not like, but this has been a few years ago, but one time on Facebook, and maybe I've said this on the show, I don't know, but and not that there's anything wrong with either of these things, but and I don't know what caused this to happen, but I was getting ads for a while for a gay ski resort. And I'm not gay and I don't ski. So it's just like, I'm not the target
But
audience for
you've
this.
never tried it.
I've never tried it. Yeah, I might want to go to the gay ski
Know
resort.
you better than you think.
Exactly. But it's like, I go on Instagram and it's like, oh, here is this, Star Wars glass or whatever that I'd never seen. I was like, oh, I really, or this t-shirt or whatever that I never knew that t-shirt existed, but I would like that. You know what I mean? So
yeah,
I'm perfectly fine with that. If they're going to advertise to me things that I want,
well, that's
great.
That's their selling. That's the Facebook selling point is like
Yeah.
and of course Facebook owns Instagram, but
yeah,
but that's
it just seems like Instagram does a much better job for me. I don't know.
Say, no. We collect all of your personal information so that we get to know you better, so that we can cater the advertising to you and show you stuff that you want.
Yeah.
And yet, I mean, that's great that that's your experience with Instagram. That's not my experience with Facebook.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. With Facebook, they do a poor job for whatever reason.
And I find the ads, instead of me like, oh, cool, that exists, I'm like, oh God, get out of my face with the,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I definitely know what because Instagram, and maybe it's just the people and the pages that I'm following, but for me, it's more or less fun stuff. The same thing with TikTok, and nothing against this, but it's not necessarily like, oh, these are people that I went to high school with, and maybe, which that is a lot of Facebook, is it's like real life friends, whereas I would say the majority of the people on Instagram and TikTok are not people that I actually know,
right?
And so I definitely had that with Facebook, where I left for months, 6 or 8 months, and I've kind of dipped my toe back into it. But there were a couple of groups that I was in that were, so I would every once in a while go on Facebook just to go into those specific groups because they were beneficial to me. It wasn't, anything negative. And I would just going in, and I would see people on, and it's like, oh, there's that person. I don't want to see what they have to say, and I would just feel kind of queasy every time. And it was like, oh, this is why I don't use Facebook. I don't know what it is about Facebook and specifically compared to some of the other ones, but
somehow on Facebook, I see a lot of people saying, maybe it's just the tone that I can't quite, but there's a snark vibe. There's check out this idiot, or,
mm-hmm.
And it doesn't even need to be the overt, like Barack Hussein Obama said, I'm like, oh my God, but there's that sort of, divided nation thing where it's like, you're either, and I know that drives clicks. Maybe that's the root of it. But it's some comment about masks, or, however you feel about them. It's the idiots on one side of the issue are doing something stupid versus the idiots on the other side of this other issue. And there's just a lot of big, frequently half thought through or not thought through opinions woven in everywhere, even when you least expect it. It's like somebody's birthday, and you're reading through the birthday thread, and then there's a comment that I go back and I reread, and I'm like, does that mean to be that bitchy, or am I just misreading that? And it's all over the platform, and it makes me sad. It bums me out.
And it'll be like, happy birthday, happy birthday, happy birthday. And then it'll be like, well, it's great that you get to celebrate a birthday because my best friend just died and now he doesn't have any more birthdays. You know what I mean? It's just like, yeah, it's, but yeah, I mean, there's certainly politics on TikTok, as well. But again, I don't know if it's just the things that I'm following, but it's like, oh, here's this really creative, funny video, that it's like, wow, these people are really talented,
Yeah, and you send me some, and I that's what I like, the people who are they're either trying to build their own brand, or they're just being silly, or they're bored. But and my daughter sends me funny things that follows on TikTok, and it's like any other crowdsourced. There's a lot of the content in which I'm just not particularly interested or impressed, but there is a lot of, and
there's some really creative people.
How short it is.
Yeah. Yeah, that's nice because I think all of our attention spans are pretty short now, So to take it back to eXistenZ, just in your opinion, how far away from something like what we see in the movie without the weird organic console things, how far away from that do you think we are?
That's really interesting. I don't know that I know enough about technology to forecast that. We are definitely working. We mentioned Elon Musk. I mentioned Elon Musk earlier. He's definitely working on a direct neural interface. That's one of his, future vision.
I think they've killed a bunch of monkeys with. I don't know if you've seen about that or not, but
I got to break a few eggs, Chris.
Yeah, break a few monkeys.
So I mean, it's something. It's something from science fiction that actual science is trying to crack, and of course, there could be wonderful applications of it. If you were blind or disabled in some way, then some sort of a neural interface might give you an entirely new access to life. But I think until we have that, you're not going to have a truly, I guess the VR things are kind of the next closest thing. And I've never really played around in the VR world, although I've heard that if you actually have what is it called? Oculus? What is it? The goggles?
Yeah, there's different companies, but
that it can be pretty cool. Like it could be, it can be pretty immersive. Like really, you could really get into it. I think when you're in there, things are still feel rendered.
Yeah.
So in this, where you're like in it so much that you're like, wait a minute, am I in the game? I can't. The only way I can tell if I'm in the game is if crazy things, bone guns and things are happening. I think that would require us developing a really good interface, and processing power would have to continue to go nuts. So
right. And then, like I was saying, you have the science fiction thing of, you have to have some kind of safeguard if it's truly so realistic that you can't tell the difference, and do you get in a scenario where people do nothing but spend all of their time in the VR world, and maybe, other than they just work just to earn money to where they can, or maybe they earn the money in the VR world,
Did you read or see Ready Player One?
Yeah, I read the book and saw the movie. Yeah.
Living in these kind of garbage trailers in the future where it's just way overpopulated, and they escape into this virtual world and spend all their time there living.
Yeah. I mean, that seems like a pretty possible scenario. I don't know, but
yeah.
So
getting old, man.
What's that?
I said we're getting old.
Yeah. So
it's these days.
So what do you think? What do you think? Did you enjoy this more than Videodrome?
I enjoyed this more than Videodrome because
it didn't have as much unlikable characters.
Yeah, didn't we have somebody post a comment about my comments on there? Like, I didn't understand that James Woods was supposed to be an unlikable character. I haven't gone back and listened to my whatever. I just don't like James Woods.
Yeah.
So, and I can't separate that from his political views now. Like, I don't remember if that was always true, if I always found James Woods off-putting, or if it's just now. But watching an old James Woods movie now, I have trouble separating an unlikable James Woods character on screen with the unlikable off-screen James Woods I don't like.
Yeah, sure.
So I like this one better because I didn't have that visceral dislike of the characters. And I feel like in Videodrome, there was a very deliberate tone that I saw in some stuff in the 80s that, like, it's a kind of a tone of the 80s that, like, thinks it's really badass. Like, you know, is this sort
Mhm.
of swagger of the 80s of like, you think you're hardcore, but you don't know shit. You know, I'm the real hardcore. And that's what that movie felt like to me, is like, oh, you want a mind bender? Well, I'm gonna bend your mind, you know, and I just kind of like, oh.
Yeah.
So
This one's kind of more straightforward.
the Videodrome may be brilliant and genius, and if you love Cronenberg and I don't get it, okay, you win. I don't care,
Mhm.
you know. And we're not. Maybe I'm just you know, I'm just a Philistine. But I like this. I like this one better than that. I like The Fly even better. And you could say, oh, this is most mainstream. Yeah, okay. I thought it told a really clean, really straightforward story with it stuck to the, you know, it was gross and it was body
Mhm.
horror and great performances and it was weird. I did watch it recently. I watched it probably a year and a half or 2 years ago, and I thought it really stands up. I was like,
Yeah.
still good. Um, and we could do that one some point if you want.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. It's been a long time since I've seen it. It's
Um,
not like a did you ever see Requiem for a Dream?
yes,
That's one of those movies that I watched it once.
yeah.
I actually bought the DVD when it came out, and I don't think I ever opened it because it was just like, that's one of those movies where like it'll pop up on a streaming service and I'll think like, maybe I should watch Requiem for a Dream. And it's just like, no, I don't think I want to. You know what I mean?
Well, do you think, do I want to take that ride right now? I mean,
Yeah.
not that you can't make movies that are something other than happy and feel good and fun.
Mhm.
They people should, and those movies are, many of them are amazing. And Requiem for a Dream is amazing,
Yeah.
but it's a tough movie to watch.
Yeah. I mean, I thought it was amazing, but I've just, anytime I've ever thought about watching it, I've just thought, I don't know. It's like maybe I just have to be in exactly the right, frame of mind to, and maybe I would watch it now and be like, oh, that wasn't as bad as what,
Yeah,
um,
maybe. Now that you
but
know where it goes, but when
yeah,
you're first watching it, you just keep hoping for some light at the end of the tunnel, and you just kind of like, nope.
I watched that with a friend who just the last 20 minutes or so, he just paced back and forth. And it was just like, oh my God, I can't, uh, but yeah. So would you, oh, one last thing that I wanted to say that I don't think I brought up is this came out the same year as The Matrix. And I was reading that it got kind of lumped in sort of as being similar to The Matrix, which a little bit similar themes, but
Yeah.
a very different movie.
Yeah. And I think that the Matrix, we talk about, I mean, whether or not it was lazy or we're missing, you know, the budgets had to have been different on those movies,
Yeah, yeah.
And the Matrix had so many things that were groundbreaking. Um, Even just from a technical standpoint, like the camera
Mhm.
take that was ubiquitous for a while, you know, but that was the first appearance of that kind of jump slow-mo and then it rotates on the axis. I mean, I'd never seen anything like that, and it was so effective in that movie in terms of creating a reality that was, you know, taking you into a virtual reality that looked normal but felt weird
Mhm.
and acted in weird ways. So I think, and on other levels, I think that movie was, and it's more of a straightforward Messiah story. I mean, it's just, you know, meet this Nebish who discovers he's the one, struggles to believe, and then finally, you know, does. And I guess
Yeah.
the first movie doesn't save the world, but comes to believe that he's the digital Messiah of this world. And that's just a nice, clean, pat story structure.
Yeah, I don't think that's a story that Cronenberg is probably going to tell. He doesn't seem to
I know.
be,
Yeah,
yeah.
and I actually like that. I mean, I like both. I like a movie that's kind of easy to fall in line with because I think it's entertaining.
Mhm.
But I also like people that say, no, I'm gonna resist. We've we've seen that a number of times, and I want to leave some questions unanswered.
Mhm.
I like that about eXistenZ. I like that it doesn't spoon feed you. I don't need to know what it all meant. I'm fine with having it explore all the different stuff.
Yeah, it's like 2001: A Space Odyssey is one of my all-time favorite movies, and I don't know how many times I've seen it, a bunch, and I'm still not 100% sure what all of it means.
Not even sure.
If you're supposed to.
I'm not even sure it does. I think it just,
Yeah.
I was Googling around. I saw some stuff on Prometheus and like cut scenes and what the architect said and all of this other stuff. But I think it's a better movie for some of that stuff being trimmed out.
Mm-hmm.
So you go to this really strange alien, literally alien place. There's a bunch of quasi mystical stuff going on that not even the people in the movie understand. And that to me, the awe inspiring of the not knowing of the unknown is kind of what the movie's about. So if you answer any of those questions, you defeat the point of the journey.
Sure.
In that film. And I think in 2001 too, it's like something's going to happen. What's going to happen? Something wonderful. Like that's as much as you get in 2001. And then it is wonderful. Like you don't know if it's good or bad or whatever, but it inspires awe, I don't know.
Yeah, for sure.
I go back and watch that movie again too, though. You
Oh
got
yeah.
time.
That was one of those where in college, I don't know how many, because it just seemed like it was always on TV, like late night TV. So that's kind of how I really grew to appreciate it. I would catch like, the last half hour or the last hour or something like that. And, so I kind of pieced it together over time. And it's one of those that just works with multiple viewing. And I'm with a lot of Kubrick. I feel that the same way about The Shining, and it's one of those where if it would be on TV, I wouldn't be able to turn it off,
Yeah.
So would you recommend eXistenZ?
Yeah, I would. And the only caveat would be, if like me, I wouldn't have watched it if you hadn't suggested we do it for this podcast. But if you like Cronenberg, then I think it's one. I didn't really know of it. It's one of the sort of lesser known ones, or to me, it was a lesser known one. And I think that if you're into it, it does explore some interesting stuff. The fact that it came out the same year as The Matrix and wrestles with some of the similar stuff is of interest.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't find it super entertaining, but I did find it interesting. And so I would recommend it on that basis.
I definitely think, Cronenberg is not for everybody. I tried to have you ever seen Dead Ringers?
No.
That one's interesting too, but I mean, if, I don't know that like not being a big Cronenberg fan, you would necessarily like it, but I tried to watch it with somebody who was pretty open-minded about movies. And we got maybe like 30 minutes into it. And she said, "Why did you think I would like this?" So it's like, okay, this is really gross. I'm like, okay. Yeah. So yeah, this is not for everybody, but it is you like Jude Law, you like Jennifer Jason Leigh, you like, Willem Dafoe has a part in it, not a big part, but
good. And Ian Holm is good.
Yeah, everybody's, despite kind of criticisms I had of Jude Law that maybe were intentional, it's a well-made film.
He's not my favorite guy on screen in everything he does.
Who, Jude Law?
Yeah, he's just not one of my favorites, although I respect the work that he does. Anyway, what were you? Cut you off.
Yeah, so I mean, I would recommend it with caveats. I definitely, I did not like this the first time around, and it's kind of like The Frighteners that we did before. I appreciated a lot more this time.
Yeah. I feel like it's interesting that this came out the same year as The Matrix, because I feel like in some ways this had a big scope. There are scenes in which the sort of powers that be are kind of coming after them, and they're kind of
Mhm.
and they're big wide shots, and it's the sort of explosions going off and guns firing and things blasting, and in the iteration as it is, it feels relatively low budget, whereas in the Matrix it would have felt very slick. And in some ways I wonder if this thing, in a world where this thing had gotten that kind of treatment, with the same movie with that level of, and I assume it's budget, maybe it's not budget, but I think if the feel of the production values on this had been slicker and kind of more manicured, my experience of this might have, it doesn't feel like an independent movie, but it feels like a movie he got the studio to give him some budget for, and he just went and took everybody to Canada to cut costs, or because he didn't want to travel. And he made the movie that he wanted to make. And
So the budget, just while you were talking, I looked it up. The budget was 15 million.
okay.
It made 2.9 million.
And what was the
So-
budget on the Matrix?
The budget, well, the Matrix made almost $500 million.
Sure.
Let's see what they say the budget was.
The Matrix. Not sure if you've heard of it.
It's a small film. Wow, the budget on the Matrix was 63 million.
Yeah. So
So obviously a lot more, but
a lot more.
yeah. But yeah, excuse me, there's a lot in, and not like 15 million is huge, but that was a pretty good budget for the time,
You got stars, you got name actors.
Right.
I'm not saying it looks cheap. I just think there are elements of the scope that are why it does open up into the wider world, and it tries to establish, but most of the film is kind of relatively intimate interiors, whether you're in the interior of the car while they're driving down the highway, or they're in the Chinese restaurant, or even when they're in the lab, it feels like they just found an old barn or factory of some kind, and then kind of dressed the set and shot.
And that, like the gas station thing, that seemed like an obvious set to me. That didn't seem like that was actually outside somewhere, again, maybe that was, to contribute to this is not the real world aspect. I don't know, but
shooting a union movie on $15 million that's not a lot. I mean, you got to pay your actors a lot of money, and you got to pay all the crew and keep everybody fed. And it's
now, I guess it was a Canadian production, so I don't know how that works as far as,
you save some money. I think you save some money shooting in Canada. I don't know if it's the case now, but for a long time, Canada gave you a lot of incentives to shoot.
Yeah.
You wanted the film industry to come to Canada.
Well, that's how Cronenberg really got his start, because he's Canadian, and they had this, these tax incentives for making films. And a lot of times when you don't have a lot of budget, people do horror. Now, maybe Cronenberg was just into horror anyway and sci-fi, and so his first, he did a few pretty low budget films with Canadian tax money early on, and some of those are interesting.
Okay.
So any thoughts about what you think you'd want to do next time?
Man, we got to pick what we're going to do for our 100th episode. I don't.
So next will be 99.
Next will be 99. I don't have something burning in the back of my. I mean, we mentioned The Fly. Is there anything in your pocket that you wanted to do?
Not off the top of my head.
You had brought up Cabin in the Woods. I don't know. I'm just not feeling it right now. But
That's fine.
We should talk about that at some point. I mean, that's right in our wheelhouse, and it's a good movie.
Is there a genre that you would want to see? Anything that like more sci-fi? Or
we haven't done a Western in a while.
That's true.
Um, and have we ever done a war movie?
I don't think so.
I don't think we have either. I don't know. I guess if anything, I'm just feeling like I kind of want to shake it up a little bit, do something a little.
This is newer, but I did not see it's one that I've always wanted to watch, but I forget what it's called, the Coen brothers Western that they did for Netflix, The Ballad of Buster Scruggs or whatever it is. Did you ever see that?
Did, yeah. I've seen it 3 or 4 times. I love it.
Oh, okay. I have not seen that.
We can talk about that. I would watch that again.
Okay. That maybe be a little, if we're going to do something really stupid for 100, maybe a little, not stupid for 99 would be.
What's interesting about The Ballad of Buster Scruggs is it's a collection of short films.
Yeah.
And the structure of it is as though they're stories. There's literally a scene where they open the book and there's chapter 1 and they sort of short stories. And so that's kind of fun. That's kind of like Stephen King, different seasons, or there's those movies come around, but they're not super common.
And well, typically that anthologies for whatever reason are usually horror. It's stuff like Creepshow, or Tales from the Crypt or whatever.
The Coen brothers, so there's definitely a dark turn to it that I think you're gonna like. But it came out at the holidays. Like it came out in, I don't know if it was 2018 or 19 or when it came out precisely, but I remember being in Parkersburg, and the kids were in bed and my parents were in bed and Rachel went to bed and I was still drinking scotch and I poured myself like, ooh, Coen brothers, and watched it at Christmas time. And so it's funny because it works. There's nothing about Christmas to that, but it somehow it worked as a holiday release. So let's do that because I love it, and I think you'll really enjoy it too. And I'd be interested to see what you think.
Do you think I could watch it with my dad? Because he loves Westerns.
Does he
likes some Coen brothers.
What Coen brothers does he not like?
He did not like No Country for Old Men.
Okay.
He loved, and this is probably super mainstream Coen brothers, but he loved True Grit. My parents both loved True Grit, but that's just kind of a straight ahead Western.
I think if they loved True Grit, there's nothing in it that is as raw as No Country for Old Men. No Country for, that's a great movie. It does,
I love No Country for Old Men.
Viscerally and emotionally, I think it cuts to the bone in a way that not all of their work does. But that's part of the point of that movie is the sort of existential bleakness of
eXistenZ.
Existential with a capital X and a capital Z. I think he'd enjoy this. There's some of them are funnier than others, and some of them are bleaker than others. But was it the quality of the violence in No Country and the kind of open-ended, like the guy, the hero you think you're following, gets it, and you're like, wait, what?
In fairness, I saw No Country for Old Men in the theater, and that was one of those. I saw it in Parkersburg, West Virginia, very middle America kind of a place. And that was one where I was just like, that was amazing. And people on the way out were saying, that's the worst movie I've ever seen. A lot of grumbling. But I kind of thought my parents would be kind of into it. And at the end, they were just like, well, that was strange. That was just kind of their reaction.
That's an example of a movie you don't get a happy payoff, right?
Right.
You don't get a satisfying, like, at the end of it. It's, I was going to say it's rough. It's actually, I think it's a very smooth movie. Like, I think it's a very masterfully made movie.
Yeah.
But part of it is that you don't get this ribbon tied up in a ribbon. And here's where we end our story on a high note. It's just sort of, the movie is over and you're not really left with anything but the, like, it follows a police sheriff who is like, what's it all where, like, I've tried to fight the bad guys my whole life, and they just seem to get better, and I don't, and now I'm an old man, and can't see how I've made any difference at all. And so you're left with this kind of like, what's the point? And it's a really bleak
Oh yeah.
at the end of a movie,
Usually I usually have a pretty good idea what they're going to like and what they're not going to like. Like, for example, if I tried to get them to watch something like Birdman, they would just be like, "Oh, this is one of the worst things we've ever watched." They would
kind of weird.
Yeah, they would not. That kind of weird is not, what they
No,
would
I bet your dad would like this. And there's lots of opportunities to take a break or stop. And it's all Western. So that's cool. And some of them are funny. It's the Coen brothers, so it's a little blend of everything. Like some of them are more funny than they are dark, and some of them are more dark.
Oh, they love, along the same lines, they love, again, I think this was a movie that very much appealed to, wide audiences, but they loved Oh Brother, Where Art Thou too, so I don't know, we'll see. I'll try it on them, and if they don't like it, not out of anything.
But I feel pretty confident that you'll like it.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. I don't know that there is a Coen brothers movie that I would say, oh, I disliked that. There are some that are better than others, but pretty much everything they've done, I enjoy.
Yeah, me too. It's like if you say, well, you really generally like Cronenberg's work, and I sort of generally say it's not my cup of tea. I feel that the Coen brothers, I'm trying to think of a Coen brothers movie. There's some of them I like better than others.
Yeah.
There's a new Coen brothers movie out. I'm generally excited to see it because I like their filmmaking.
Exactly. Yeah. I anticipate enjoying it a lot, so.
Well, I hope that proves out. Chris talk movies at gmail.com. Leave us a comment. We're on YouTube. We're on the podcast apps. I guess we're on TikTok now, although we haven't put anything on.
We're working on it. Yeah. We got to figure out stuff to put on there. Yeah.
Something entertaining, hopefully. Leave us a comment, like, subscribe. That's great for us. We love that. And we are going to do The Ballad of Buster Scruggs by the Coen brothers. I believe still on Netflix. I hope still on.
I think it was made for Netflix, so I don't think the made for Netflix stuff ever leaves.
Yeah, I hope not. And that's what we're doing for next week. And then after that is our 100th episode. Kind of crazy.
It is.
You're gonna pick some humdinger, probably a stinker, and I think we're both gonna maybe indulge in alcoholic beverages and just let stuff get stupid.
For sure.
And we'll see how that goes. So eXistenZ, I think 2 thumbs up, slightly more tepid thumbs up from me, perhaps. But
yeah, I'm more the Cronenberg guy. So,
yep. Anything else to add, monsieur?
I don't think so.
All right, then we will talk to you next week.